I can guarantee you we've got at least a couple of hundred people in prison in this state alone for accidental fires, and we need to get them out.
Imagine being convicted of a crime you didn't commit. Now imagine being sentenced to death for it. No appeals left, no last-minute stays, just the cold, irreversible finality of execution. This isn't a dystopian nightmare. It's a reality that has played out in the United States more times than we'd like to admit. The Death Penalty Information Center has documented numerous cases where individuals were executed despite serious doubts about their guilt. Some were victims of shoddy investigations, prosecutorial misconduct, or outright systemic bias. Others saw new evidence emerge after their deaths, evidence that might have exonerated them if only it had come sooner. Since 1973, over 190 death row inmates have been exonerated in the U.S. But what about those who weren't so lucky? Those whose cases were never revisited in time? Those who were executed despite glaring red flags in their trials? In 1983, Carlos DeLuna was executed for the stabbing death of a Texas convenience store clerk, Wanda Lopez. However, a 2006 Chicago Tribune investigation uncovered shocking evidence that questioned his guilt. Reporters Maurice Posley and Steve Mills uncovered a chilling possibility. Another man, Carlos Hernandez, may have been the real killer. Hernandez had a criminal history and even confessed to the crime multiple times. Despite this, DeLuna was convicted based on flawed evidence, including faulty eyewitness testimony and a failure to investigate Hernandez. The case took another turn when Columbia Law School's professor, James Liebman, and his team revealed even more troubling evidence. They discovered serious problems in the prosecution's case, including intentional misrepresentation of Hernandez's role. The two Carloses were so similar that even their families confused their photos. In fact, Hernandez had committed violent crimes remarkably similar to the murder DeLuna was convicted of. Liebman's detailed 2014 book, The Wrong Carlos, sheds light on this miscarriage of justice. The case was later dramatized in the 2021 Netflix documentary The Phantom, bringing this haunting story to the public's attention. It's a chilling reminder of the flaws in our justice system and the lives that could be ruined by wrongful convictions. In a gripping two-part investigative series, the Houston Chronicle reveals serious doubts about the guilt of Ruben Cantu, a Texas man executed in 1993 for a crime he insisted he didn't commit. At just 17 years old, Cantu was convicted of capital murder for the shooting death of a San Antonio man during an attempted robbery. Now, both the prosecutor and jury forewoman have expressed concerns about the case's validity. Juan Moreno, the key eyewitness who was wounded during the robbery, has come forward to say he was pressured by police to identify Cantu as the shooter, even though he initially said it wasn't him. Moreno admitted to being scared and coerced into giving false testimony. Additionally, Cantu's co-defendant, David Garza, revealed in an affidavit that he allowed Cantu to be wrongly accused and executed, even though he wasn't with him that night. Bexar County District Attorney Sam Millsap, who sought the death penalty, confessed that he shouldn't have pushed for Cantu's execution based on such questionable testimony. Even the jury forewoman admitted that with more effort, an innocent life could have been spared. This tragic case highlights the risks of a flawed justice system. In a groundbreaking year-long investigation, the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund has uncovered shocking evidence that Larry Griffin, executed by Missouri on June 21, 1995, may have been innocent. Griffin maintained his innocence until his death, and new findings reveal that his execution could have been a tragic mistake. Key revelations include the testimony of a man injured in the same drive-by shooting who insists Griffin was not involved. Even more compelling, the first police officer on the scene has come forward with a new account that casts doubt on the trial witness who identified Griffin as the murderer. The NAACP's findings have led them to identify 3 new suspects, all currently in prison for other murders. Prosecutor Jennifer Joyce has now reopened the case, promising a thorough review. University of Michigan law professor Samuel Gross, who supervised the investigation, has boldly stated, "There is no real doubt that we have an innocent person. If we went to trial today, we would win hands down. Will justice finally be served for Larry Griffin?" New DNA evidence has raised serious doubts about Odell's murder and rape conviction. In 1991, 3 Supreme Court justices questioned his guilt and whether he should have represented himself. The new blood evidence casts doubt on his connection to the crime. Yet in 1996, the Fourth Circuit Court reinstated his death sentence. The U.S. Supreme Court denied his claims of innocence and refused to consider new evidence. Despite his requests for further DNA testing, Odell's plea was rejected, and he was executed on July 23rd. His case remains a tragic reminder of potential miscarriages of justice. In 1982, David Spence was wrongfully charged with the murder of 3 teenagers, allegedly hired by a convenience store owner to kill another girl, but killing the victims by mistake. The store owner, Munir Deeb, was initially sentenced to death but later acquitted in a retrial. Investigating officers, including Lieutenant Marvin Horton and Detective Ramon Salinas, both concluded that Spence was innocent. Despite no physical evidence linking him to the crime, the case against Spence was driven by a determined narcotics cop who relied on testimonies from prison inmates given favors in exchange. The truth? Spence was wrongfully convicted, and the case raises questions about the integrity of investigations based on dubious testimonies. On June 22, 2000, Gary Graham was executed in Texas despite claims of his innocence. At just 17 years old, he was convicted for the 1981 robbery and shooting of Bobby Lambert outside a supermarket in Houston. The conviction hinged mainly on the testimony of Bernadine Skillern, who claimed to have seen the killer's face from 30 to 40 feet away through her car windshield. However, 2 grocery store workers who had a clear view of the assailant said Graham was not the killer. Shockingly, these witnesses were never interviewed or called to testify. 3 jurors later revealed they would have voted differently had they seen all the evidence. This case raises serious questions about the reliability of eyewitness testimony and the integrity of the justice system. Imagine being sentenced to death for a crime you didn't commit. This tragic reality was the fate of Claude Jones, who was executed in Texas in 2000 for a liquor store murder. The key piece of evidence that led to his conviction was a strand of hair found at the crime scene, which was believed to belong to him, but DNA testing years later shattered that belief. The hair actually belonged to the victim, not Jones. Before his execution, Jones' lawyers pleaded for DNA testing on the hair, a request denied by both the courts and then Governor George W. Bush, who was not even made aware of the plea. Barry Scheck, co-founder of the Innocence Project, argued that unreliable forensic science and a lack of proper post-conviction review had robbed Jones of his life. Fast forward to 2007, when the Innocence Project and other groups sued to get the evidence tested. In 2010, they won the battle, and Judge Paul Murphy ordered the DNA testing. The results, confirming Jones' innocence, were a devastating reminder of the flaws in the criminal justice system. Jones's son, Dwayne, expressed the deep emotional toll this injustice took on his family, calling for reform to prevent such tragic mistakes in the future. He hoped this case would serve as a wake-up call to society about the serious issues in the criminal justice system, especially regarding the death penalty. Jones' execution marked one of the last under Governor Bush before he became president, a dark moment in the history of the Texas death penalty.